Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. Now bear with me, this is only going to be a short video, a little update if you like. The other day, one of my subscribers, Stuart, sent me his Policar P160. He wanted me to do a few little jobs on it that he was trying to mimic in my range of 3 videos from a few videos back, and he was struggling with various little aspects of it. One of those was pod float. Now in those series of videos I show you how I can get quite a bit of pod float on this car. Now a little bit of a disclosure there. I didn't get all the pod float that I actually wanted for that video, because sometimes you can get snowblind when you're doing a video. There's so much information to do, so much work that needs to go on. You can get a little bit bogged down, and sometimes you just need to stand back and take a deep breath and contemplate life and then come back to the job. But of course, if you're making video content, that's really difficult to do because you've got to keep going. But I had the ability now to sort of step back and think about this car from a few months ago, and then Stuart's car turned up. So getting the pod float on his car, same as mine. When I did all the work on it that I needed to do to his car, I still wasn't quite getting the pod float that I wanted, and indeed I didn't get it with this car either. Now this car is a lot better than it absolutely was, but it's still not quite right, to be honest. And Stuart's car was exactly the same. It just wasn't quite there. There was I had movement, but it was still a little bit squishy, and I could not work out where it was being squishy. Same with this car, but I just didn't disclose it at the time. And I thought, this is not going to beat me now. This car's been done. I finished it. I want to really nail this car, Stuart's car, and work out where that little bit of squishiness is actually coming from. Same with mine. And I found it. I've actually found where the pod is being hung up in this car, and it's quite straightforward to fix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you on the bench, and I'm going to open up my P160, and I'm going to show you exactly where it's being held up and why you can't get that super free rattly pod float. And I'm going to show you, and I'll do the work on this car, on this bench right now, and then we'll all know exactly how to get that really loose, nice pod float. So let's get on the table here, let's get this car back out the box and get my scalpel out and show you where the problem is. Okay, so this is the car that I tuned during those 3 videos, and this is the amount of pod float that I got. Not too bad, but there's a little bit of resistance there that I could never find where it was coming from. So what I'll do is I'll take the body off and I'll show you where I found that actual resistance is coming from. Okay, so we're in. So the actual resistance is coming from the tips of these motor mounts. And what's happening is the tips of those motor mounts are actually catching on the back side of the driver, his hips I guess it would be. So the trick is to just trim the very tops of those ears on that motor mount there. Just a little bit, just to remove that amount of plastic there. Now you're not actually taking away anything on the motor mount that's stopping the motor mount from actually holding the motor. You're just removing those protrusions that just get in the way of the driver. So you end up with something along the lines of this, like this. Just there, just taking away the tops of those mounts. And then what you want to do is you ideally want to get a Dremel, and you want to chop away a little bit more of this material here. Now I'm going to get a Dremel now, and I'm going to do that for you, and I'll come back. So I've Dremeled out the underside of the driver, and hopefully you'll see exactly where I've Dremeled him out. I've Dremeled all this area here out. There's quite a lot of plastic there, so you don't need to be too worried about how deep you go. Obviously don't go too far, because you're going to end up coming through his crotch area there. But you just want to take away all those contours and smooth them all out. And as I showed you just a minute ago, you just want to take away the ears on the tops of that motor mount. Don't go below the motor bearing itself, just take away those little protrusions on the top. And then when you reassemble the car, you should get all the extra float that you were hoping for. Now the other thing that I did on Stuart's car, my subscriber, was underneath here I actually thinned this piece of plastic down by half. The other thing I did do was I tapered the sides of this pod, and I'll do that for you now. So there we are, we're on the underside now, and all I did was just shaved away the corners of this underside piece here, because what we actually have is the wires going underneath this, and those wires can offer a certain amount of resistance to the pod float. So by just scalloping out this piece here, it just gives you a little bit more clearance for those wires to go through. So there we are, like that. Just a little bit of scalloping on this portion here to give you a little bit more clearance for the wires. I'll put this back together again and I'll see what we've created. So there we are. I've dremeled this bar here down to half its thickness. And as Harry said on his Home Racing World video, he doesn't think that needs to be there, and I don't think it needs to be there either. But it is useful to holding the wires down. So if you wanted to, you could just sort of cut off the second half of that bar completely, I think. But I've just dremeled mine down by half. So we'll reassemble it now, and we'll see where we're at after that. And there we are, all put back together again. Now, one little admission, I did actually open out these two holes here to 3.3 mil, just to give a little bit more slack in this front brace here, because it does tend to bind up a little tiny bit. So what we've now got is a really nice amount of very sloppy pod float. So there is all my available pod float there. And if I just tap the wheel, if you look at these two screws here, you should see that the float actually drops under its own weight. So there's one side, you can see, there we are, that's all dropping now under its own weight. And on the other side, you should be able to see the same. There we are, you can actually see it dropping under its own weight there. I'll take my fingers off the top of the body, that might help. There we are, you can actually see it dropping under its own weight. So that is now completely free to travel, really, really nice and loose. And you've now got genuine, really free and sloppy travel, which is exactly what you want. So there we are. Now we all know exactly where to trim this car to get that really nice loose pod float, and I really hope that Stuart enjoys his car after I've tweaked it, and I will certainly be enjoying mine now I've got some really nice pod float. So now we all know exactly how to get this car fully sorted all the way, and this little video just sort of tops up those main 3 videos, and I think now completes the whole project on this car, and we all know what to do with it. So if you found this information useful, maybe you want to subscribe, and if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.